All right, so I'm going to hold my Pirke Avos, ethics for our fathers, as it is known. Again, want to walk around holding by Pirke Avos, ethics for our fathers, as is known. We are in second chapter, Mishna 16. Right, this is part 43. There'll be a part 44, part 45. I'm sure there'll be a part 46 as well. Again, we're going to hold by Pirke Avos, ethics for our fathers. Chapter 2, Mishnah 16, and it's part 43, I guess. And the Mishnah says, in the name of Rabbi Yeshua, an evil eye, evil inclination, hatred of other people, remove a person from this world. So we started speaking last week about the evil inclination, right? And we mentioned that, we had a whole discussion whether the evil inclination, right, it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, right, or, in general. And evil inclination, his job, or let's say better, according to Tosfos Yontif, one of the great commentaries on the Mishnah, right, says that the evil inclination is what is the majority of desire. Now, what's its job? What's the job of the evil inclination? Evil inclination's job is to try and get us to sin, right? Try and destroy us, convince us to do things that are wrong, right? Basically, through our desire. So this is, on the one hand, it's there to destroy us, right? That is definitely one thing that it's out there for. On the other hand, it's got this ability to do what? To help us reach potential, right? We're in this world to toil. As the Ramchal says, and we mentioned many times. Nonetheless, we have good inclination, bad inclination, right? With the evil inclination itself, the Gemara says that you're given an antidote, right? You're given an antidote to fight it off, and the antidote is Torah. But the antidote alone, right? The antidote alone is not enough. A person needs heavenly help, right? In other words, we ourselves are not going to be able to overcome the evil inclination. The evil inclination needs to be taken care of through what? Through Torah, right? And you're going to need God's help. So it's so powerful. The goal was, certainly from the beginning of creation, that the evil inclination should not be a part of us. Even though we mentioned that Adam has a great idea, it's going to eat from the tree. What's putting the evil inclination inside of us going to do? Essentially, the evil inclination is going to give us the ability that if we do the right thing, exponentially will elevate the body, elevate the soul. If we do the wrong thing, just the opposite. Right? Just the opposite. So if that's the case, then Adam's got a good point. Right? A sin for the sake of heaven. I mean, brought death to the world, to what God wanted, obviously. God calls him a heretic, which we mentioned before. Even though God said you're right, if you put the evil inclination inside of you, exponentially you can either elevate the soul or debase the soul, right? And the body. So God says it's true. That's very true. That's the power of the evil inclination. Right? Now, there's one issue. What's God saying? It's not what I wanted. It's not what I created the world for. Right? It's not what I wanted. And that's why he calls him a heretic. He thought, he can reinvent the wheel. And he thought he knew better. But he has a point. He certainly has a point. Right? And the point is that if we do the right thing, we can elevate the soul. We can elevate the body. We can reach high spiritual levels, but it goes the other way also. Yeah, so the evil inclination, on the one hand, what's its goal? What's its goal? Destroy us. That's the goal. The evil inclination, wants to get us to sin. Okay. On the other hand, right, it's always another viewpoint. And the viewpoint is that even though that's what it does, and it never sleeps, and I gotta be, in control at all times, no matter what. The evil inclination can trap us. Nonetheless, it is a mechanism in order for us to reach potential. Now, the problem is we come from this world, right? The Chosavova says, right? We come from this world. So the second a child is born, always wants physical pleasure. And that, it doesn't end when it gets older, just wants more physical pleasure. The body, right? God created mankind from the dust, the four corners of the earth. So every second of every day, from the fact the child is born, what happens? Child wants more desire, right? Grows up, wants more desire. But there's an antidote, right? So again, very powerful according to the secular world, right? In the secular world, it wants more, right? Person acquires money. You have 200. You want more. You have 400. You want more, right? It never ends, right? The quest for money, the quest for desire, as King Solomon says in Proverbs, never ends. It never ends. So the soul at a major disadvantage, right? As we've said many times, the soul comes from the spiritual world. The fact that the soul comes from the spiritual world, what happened? What should happen? The Ramchal says in Derech Hashem should totally destroy the body. That's how powerful it is, but it gets trapped. It gets trapped. So the soul will never be able to shine the way it needs to, except if it's in the spiritual world. Okay, so in this world, how can the soul gain traction? Right? How can the soul be powerful over here? Keeping Torah mitzvahs. Right? That strengthens the soul. Other things I go away from that, I give in, person gives in to their evil inclination, you take steps back, right? Or as I would say, you take 2 steps back. Okay. But it's a battlefield, right? The whole thing is a battlefield. And there are many, many things we're not in control of, right? As we said before. We're not in control of our parents. We're not in control of our siblings. We're not in control of our socioeconomic situation. Even about what we do by work. Yeah, are we in control, like, who our co-workers are, and what they say, and what they do? We're not in control, right? So many things that we're not in control. Comes on God himself and says, so what? Even if you're not in control, even if all the stakes are stacked against you, yeah, and the stakes are very high, as we get closer to Rosh Hashanah, the stakes are against you. The fact is, the person wants desire every second of every day. Yeah. How's the soul going to work? How's the soul going to fight this? Oh, I got an antidote. I have Torah. Torah has the ability to make it stronger. Very good. That's the lifeline. If you don't have Torah, right? If you don't have Torah, then what distinguishes us from animals? Right? Revelio Opion's question. What distinguishes us from animals? Person gonna say, whatever, secular person, Jew, non-Jew, doesn't matter. He'll say, I got freedom. You're stuck with all these antiquated laws and, this and that. I got real freedom. What does real freedom mean? I can do what I want. I absolutely have the ability to do what I want. Very good. Says Revelio Opion. Yeah, so if that's true, what distinguishes you from an animal? Animals also do what they want. Right? I don't know how far this conversation goes. They're not going to want to, a person's not going to want to be compared to an animal. Okay. But essentially, what's the difference? What's the difference between us and them? Yeah, an animal says the same thing. So come along, Rav Eli Lopian, blessed memory, with Torah giants in Mosul, last generation, says Rav Eli Lopian, you know what differentiates us? We have the ability to go against our desires. That's the difference. We have the ability, or let's say better, to go against our will, to go against our desires. Animals can't do that. Animals can choose they want to eat, not want to eat. Okay, animals program DNA. They are programmed. They can't do whatever they want. Yeah, they can't do whatever they want. So, says Rav Eli Lopian, if you don't say that we have the ability to overcome desire, overcome things we want to do, what's going to happen? You're no different than an animal. Right? Because animals have no control either. So, at the end of the day, I have an antidote. Even though the soul's at a major disadvantage, right? The soul's at a major disadvantage. Nonetheless, I can strengthen it. How can I strengthen it? Learning Torah. Yeah, doing mitzvahs, making blessings. But a person will say, but what if, oh, it doesn't get back, a person's burnt out. Let's say, listen back, like, some of the non-Jews this wouldn't apply, right? That, they're not working or whatever that, they should be learning, right? Doesn't necessarily apply to them. Okay. But how does the person want to look? How does the person want to look? What's so bad? Person watches videos, animal videos. What's so bad? Kind of funny, right? See what cats do, what other animals do. Yeah, okay. But times go by, right? Sorry, time goes by. How much time is going to a person watch? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, less, whatever it is, right? Not all things forbidden are bad, I'm not going to say are bad or like, not fun to do, right? Obviously, these things are fun to do. Obviously, if you enjoy that or other things, whatever it is, it's a time killer. For sure, it's a time killer. Okay. You say we're going to learn anyway. What's the big deal, right? So to speak, what does it matter? What does it matter? Not hurting anybody. Not really doing anything wrong, technically. Just wasting time, but okay. Right? So if it's a Jew, wasting time probably when it could have been learning, if they could have been learning, which we're just going to mention that God will say that's one thing I'll never forgive. Right? That's going to be very severe. God can overlook the big three that you give up your life for anytime, any place, murder, idolatry, or immorality. God can overlook that. Jerusalem Talmud says. Very good. If a person could have learned and they didn't, yeah, God can't overlook that. Right? Wasting time, God can't overlook. Yeah, again, maybe it doesn't apply to a non-Jew. Okay. But even if it doesn't, think about it. Think about it. What does King David say? King David says, we're only in this world for how long? 70 years. Right? We're only in this world 70 years. If we have strength 80 years, everything else is a bonus. And the older we get, the harder it is. It's harder for us to remember. Right? The body starts to break down. A lot of things. Okay. So you're not here that long. It doesn't matter when this person starts this process, but you're not here that long. Right? Shouldn't we maximize? Shouldn't we maximize, time? It's brought down. I remember where the source is, but I definitely saw it over the years. A person maximizes 3% of their brain. 3% maximize. Yeah. So we have to do everything in our ability, strengthen, obviously. Strengthen that. And what better way to do it than learn Torah? Because everything else is a distraction. It's a huge distraction. Sports, big distraction. Entertainment, big distraction. Politics, big distraction. It's all a big distraction. People can put the twist on it, what the Torah means, this, that, and what the connection is, maybe the Torah portion of the week. Okay. Yeah, current events, how we look at it through a Torah lens. Okay, there's what to be said for that. Not going to say not, but it's overkill. How many How many political pundits does the person have to listen to? So I want to be educated. I want to know what's going on in the world. Okay? Person wants to know what's going on in the world. Yeah? Is there anything wrong with that? A friend of mine would say, if there's a war, I'll find out about it. Yeah? But the reality is, what am I doing here? What's my purpose? Right? What's my purpose? So, the Ramchal says, his introduction, Derech Hashem, what is he? Sorry, in his introduction to Path is Just, he says, we're here to Izaneg al Hashem. What does that mean? To enjoy God's goodness in this world. How am I supposed to do that? Yeah, through Torah. Because obviously God created the world. God could not have made it for him. First, the Rambam's 13 principles is what? That God is absolute. So if God is absolute, he has no needs. He absolutely has no needs. Very good. He's got no needs. So if he's got no needs, why create the world? What does he need the world for? He doesn't. He's got no needs. Right? So by definition, he didn't create it for him. Right? So what did he create it for? Created for men. Very good. So if we're supposed to enjoy this world, how am I supposed to do it? Well, he gives a book, manufactured himself, right? Passed down to Moses, gave it to us. Very good. So that's our obligation, to keep what he says. Okay. Now, people will say, people will make the claim, like, come on, it's so hard. Maybe a lot of these laws don't make sense, which is true. Logically speaking, right, more than 80% don't make sense. But I have to make sense of it. I have to work hard. But God himself says, you keep what I say. Not just is going to be reward. Yeah, that goes without saying. If you do what I say, very good, right? Just saw in this week's parsha. You have the curses, right? If you don't do what I say, right? If you don't do what I say, it's going to be payback. And we see throughout the millennium, it's payback. It's a lot of serious payback for Jewish people. Yeah, pogroms, Holocaust, other things, okay. But he says, all this that you're going to do, and you're going to honor me, is going to benefit you. Now forget about anti-Semitism and suffering and all that. It's a whole other issue. But he's telling you, what you keep and what you do, what does it do? Changes you. It makes you a different person. Right? One example. Right? One example I always give. A person works on not cursing. Yeah? Everybody and their mother curses. Right? Old people, young people, some more, some less, but everybody curses. Right? I'm saying every single word they say, but whatever, they curse. They definitely curse. Now, if a person says, okay, I want to work on this. I want to work on this for 1 hour a day. Whatever that hour of the day is, I'm not going to curse, no matter what. Probably the worst hour of your day. But let's say 1 hour a day, 20 minutes a day, half an hour a day, whatever it is. A person says, no matter what happens, I'm not going to curse. Now, if they do that, and they work hard at that, over time, I'm not saying that it's going to increase it, but over time, what's going to happen? They have more sensitivity. They have more sensitivity to curses. So when they hear someone else curse, even if they just started working on it, they're like, ew, yeah, this person talks like a truck driver, right? No offense, anyone's a truck driver out there. Whatever, they curse like a fiend. Every other word's a curse word. Okay. You weren't that much different. What changed? So your whole mentality changed. Now you're going to work on not doing that. Yeah. Or not speaking Lashon Hara, right? Not speaking Lashon Hara against other people, right? Speaking badly against others. So what do? See, they go on a certain amount of time. No matter what happens, I'm not going to do that. Doesn't mean you don't work on it the rest of the time. But you have a specific time, I'm not going to do that. Okay. So even if you have a specific time, you're not going to do it. Very good. What is that going to do? What is that going to do? Your resolve is going to be much stronger, right? The more you learn about it, the more sensitive you are. And therefore, when you hear other people say, speak badly against others or whatever, because that's the way of the world, you'll be much more sensitive. Maybe, however, you'll be much more careful, right? You'll be much more careful what you say. Now, in this generation, that's huge. That is not a small thing. Forget about the severity of the punishment. That's another thing. Jew speaks badly against someone else. You get more than 30 prohibitions, right? More than 30 prohibitions, in one shot. Well, someone's going to say, everybody does it. Like, what do you want from me? Everybody does it. Okay. Because everyone does it doesn't mean a person should do it, right? It's very common. True. Very, very true. It's common. And, right? So there are more than 30 prohibitions. So, so this is something I got to work at. Yeah. This is something I got to work at. Very good. It's not an easy thing to change. Changing speech? Yeah, changing any character trait is hard. Right, as Rev Israel Soeter, a blessed memory, the founder of the Muslim movement, said, change any character trait. One character trait is hard. Changing the way I talk. Changing speech. What's a person going to say in general? Impossible. That's what they're going to say. They're going to say this is an impossibility. Not only that, they're going to say it's the way of the world. This is what everybody does, right? Anti-talk radio, sports, politics, whatever. Everyone's got an opinion, and they're going to trash other people in the process, right? Person listens to the news. Yeah, they're not just giving the information. They got a bias. They absolutely have a bias, what they're saying. How much they research it, they didn't research it, doesn't matter. They have a bias. Right? They are going to give their commentary, which really doesn't matter. Who cares? Right? Who cares what they have to say? But that's not even the point. The point is something negative's coming out against someone else. Right? What do we call that in the vernacular? That's Lashon Hara. Now, if someone spoke Lashon Hara and it's something I have to guard myself, they're warning you, you have to guard yourself against them. Okay. Does that mean I can believe it 100%? No. Can't believe it 100%. But what I can do is guard myself against it. Very good. That you're allowed to do. That for sure you're allowed to do. Right? But again, what's the problem? Right? The problem is these type of things do not put us at the top of the totem pole in general. Yeah? It's not going to do that. You're in a group of people that are speaking Lashon Hara. Right? So what's the Chofetz Chaim saying? You're trying to stop them. Change subject, other things. What if you can't? Yeah, is they're gonna make fun of you, and they're gonna say things. Oh, what are you like? So pure, like speaking about someone else. Like who cares? Maybe they'll speak more. Okay, yeah, better look stupid in the eyes of people than certainly stupid in the eyes of God. Right? No question. Yeah, but what if you can't change the subject and you can't walk away? Let's say you're stuck. You're in this situation. It happens. I'm sure it happens. Yeah, people are speaking. You can't change the subject. Yeah. You can't bring the subject, somewhere else. So what do you do? So whatever they say, even you're not participating, let's say you show a sour face what they're talking about. Okay. Yeah. So that should give them a hint. Maybe it won't. Whatever it is, good. But you can't speak about it. Now you're listening to it. So now the problem is if they say something and you believe it, so now you're guilty of listening to Lashon Hara. Yeah, you're going to say, but I was there. What can I do? So let's say you're going to do anything. Can't change the subject. You can't leave. You're stuck in this conversation. Or let's say better, you're stuck sitting there or standing there. Doesn't matter. You're stuck there. So what do? At the very least, you can't believe 100% what they're saying. If it's something you got an obligation to look out for yourself and to guard yourself, that you're allowed to do. That for sure you're allowed to do. But otherwise you can't. So you're going to say, or someone's going to say, but this happens all the time. I get this question a lot. People are going to say, but it happens all the time. So it's a test, like anything else. I saw someone bring down that, an interesting thing. They say, why should it be that I'm getting tested that way? What did I do to deserve such a thing? There's a famous story with Rabbi Akiva Eiger. I think it's with Rabbi Akiva Eiger, blessed memory, that Rabbi Akiva Eiger traveled to, I think, a wedding of a sister. I think that was the case. traveled to the wedding of his sister, and he was talking to someone at the wedding, and this person wasn't even Lashon Hara per se, what the person said. It was more like son, like scoffing, mocking, whatever it was. I don't think it was Lashon Hara. Yeah, he turned white, ran out of the hall. Ran out of the hall. Look for a place to hide somewhere. Why? Because he said on himself, it must be, I must have done something wrong or said something wrong somewhere that I had to hear this. In other words, he said, it depends on me. So he tried to think, what could he have done? What could he have done to cause this? Right? So I saw it brought down somewhere, I forget where I saw it, that one of the reasons this may happen is because of something you did. In other words, you were put in that situation because, you brought upon yourself, let's say. Didn't happen for no reason. Right? Nothing happens for no reason. A lot of times we don't necessarily understand. We don't fathom. Okay. But here it's your responsibility. So if something happened and they're speaking, you happen to be there. Now a person can say, it's Murphy's Law, right? You're the wrong place, the wrong time. Maybe. But this question comes up a lot. Why am I stuck in this situation? Why should I have to listen to this? Good. Legitimate question. Right? And usually my answer is, it's a test. It's a test. You're going to believe it. You're going to repeat it. Yeah, but it goes beyond the test. Right? I don't like to scare people too much. But part of the issue is we may have caused it. We may have brought it upon ourselves. You can say, I didn't do that. What could I have done? What could I have done? Why do I laugh? Because we forget. Time's gone by. Yeah. 6 months have gone by. Years gone by. We don't remember everything we've done. Why don't you take copious notes every day? Of things you've done, or good or bad or whatever. We don't do that. Right? We don't say anything better. There are people that do that. Right? But we don't remember. If you don't do that, and you don't take what we call cheshbon and nefesh, self-accounting, don't remember. You will not remember what you do. Now, there is one saving grace on Yom Kippur that will say that, we'll say in Shemona Esrei, time meditation, whatever you want to call it, things I know and things I don't know. Yeah? But how can you repent on things you don't know? Good question. How can I repent for that? You didn't even know you did anything wrong. Right? That's why I think we're going to be shocked. When a person dies, after 120 years, God's going to say, oh, look, you did this, you did that, you did the other thing. Yeah. Person's going to remember some things. Some things I'm sure you won't remember. Yeah. If you don't remember, how can you repent for it? How can you get atonement for it? So we say in the Shemona Esrei, things I remember, I don't remember. God remembers. God 100% remembers. Yeah. So hopefully, whatever I don't remember, God should atone for. Now, if it's a sin between you and God, that's one thing. Yeah, and hopefully Yom Kippur will atone for that. What if it's between you and man? You don't remember. You don't remember you did something, you said something, whatever it may be. You don't remember. Yeah, so what do? Yeah, so you're stuck now. Now you're dead. Can't do anything about it. Right? You cannot now go ask that person for forgiveness. You didn't remember. You don't remember you did anything wrong. That person didn't forgive you, let's say. Yeah. So it's a scary proposition. Ignorance, is not bliss over here. But you gotta say, come on, we're so busy, we're busy chasing our tails on a daily basis. We don't have time for this. The Ramchal, Ramosh Chaim Luzzatto, just saw this the other day. Yeah. Ramosh Chaim Luzzatto brings down in passages. He said, this is such an important thing. Your relationship to God, your relationship to man. He says, why is it there are so many other things people take stock of, like business and who knows what. I'm not saying person doesn't have to put bread on the table. Obviously, you have to. Yeah, but your relationship with others and how you affect others. Why don't people think about this? Why don't people set significant amount of time? You're not saying any time. He said, I'm sure people think about it a little bit. But he said, if this is the most important thing in life, which is my relationship to God, my relationship to others, how can it be? How can it be, says the Ramchal? How can it be? I didn't think about it. I never thought about it. I never thought about it so much. But isn't that seemingly most important thing? Wouldn't we say it's more important than anything else in life? Of how I deal with others? Yeah, and vice versa. And how I react. Yeah, because the only thing we're going to take with us in the next world are what we've done in this world, for good or for bad. So the Ramchal says, I don't understand. This is such a crucial thing. It's a crucial thing for life. How can a person not spend any time doing it? I'm not saying no time. But he says, if this is the most important thing, how can you not spend so much time thinking about it? What's the answer? What's the obvious answer? We're busy. We're busy. Now, let's say it's legitimately true. Let's say it's true. Yeah, we are busy. But don't we have an obligation to stop at some point, take stock of what we're doing on a daily basis, not just, right before we go to sleep? Shouldn't we spend, especially in the month of Elul, right? Rosh Hashanah got a week away, we can change away. The whole world's going to get judged and everyone else is going to get judged, right? Humanity's going to get judged, Jews and non-Jews. Shouldn't a person take more time to think about it, during this time? But he's talking about in general. He's not even talking about during this time. He's talking about a person just to be taking stock of things, every day, and spend significant time doing it. Because that's the most important thing. What I say, how I act, how I affect others, right? We said before, mentioned last week by Yaakov Avinu, spoken about this a number of times. Yaakov Avinu takes the blessing. Takes away the blessing from Esav. Good, Esav didn't deserve the blessing. Okay. Yeah, but even though he took the blessing, what happened? He listened to his mother. He would aim, right? Listen to his mother. And she has prophecy. But what happens? Esav gets upset. Esav cries. Good old Uncle Esav cries. Okay. But he didn't deserve it. So what? So what if he cries? He didn't deserve it. Right? He doesn't deserve the blessing. Good. Generations later, says the Roman Cutler, blessed memory, started achieving Lakewood, New Jersey. One of the Torah giants of the last generation. Everyone, no one disagrees. Says Rav Aaron, generations later, his progeny get punished because he was the conduit. He was the one that caused Esav to cry. But he didn't do anything. He listened to his mother, which, should give you long life in the next world, right? Besides that, and send away the mother bird, 2 commands you get long life for, very good. And just prophecy, right? So you got 2 strikes for him. Listen to his mother, just prophecy. Which caused him pain. Sorry, he caused him pain. It's through him, he caused him pain. It's not my fault. Not my fault. Yeah? Generations later, his progeny get punished for it. Now, we'll have to make a little bit of a distinction here. Imagine someone against their will, gets thrown, a bunch of people pick him up and throw him, onto a baby, kills the baby. God forbid. They use him as a human cannonball, let's say. Yeah? They throw him, such impact, his baby dies. Now, is that his fault? Because they onus. It's against his will. He's not in control. Right? He even told them, kill me before you let me do this. And they say, no. Yeah. If he could have, that's what he should have done. Right? That's exactly what he should have done. Who says the life of the child's any redder, the blood is any redder than his. You're not allowed to kill him. Right? He's not allowed to kill him. You say it's not his fault. He's being used as a slingshot, as a cannonball. Yeah? So now we can throw out the question. I don't know if it's such a good comparison, but you can throw out the question that it's not his fault. He's totally under onus, right? It's beyond his capability. He can't do anything to stop it, let's say. But it's through him this child dies. He's not going to die. He's not going to die from impact. Might get injured. Yeah. Depending how high they throw him up or whatever. But he's not going to die from it, let's say. Yeah. But, let's just say, he lands with his body coming down, not the other way around. Not from the head coming down. That he could die. That he could die. Head collision, for sure he could die. Okay. You think it's not his fault. Everyone would agree. Everyone would agree it's not his fault. He's under onus. Very good. It's beyond his capability. Can't do anything to change it. Good. But it's through him this child dies. So you'd have to ask the question. Why through him? You can say they could have used anybody else. Could have. They're going to take someone else to do this. Good. They chose him. For whatever reason. Now, the fact that they choose him, really he's going to give up his life rather than do it. Yeah. Well, let's say they don't give that option. Now, this is worse. Because his body is causing this baby to die through impact. Right? It's not just he did something, and he caused somebody pain. Yeah? That's a harder example. Because practically speaking, okay, he did what he did. Listened to his mother. She had prophecy. But he caused pain. He's the one that caused him pain. So therefore, his progeny get punished later. But this is something totally different. Here, the person being used as a slingshot. They caused the pain themselves. Yeah, literally. They smushed this child. God forbid. They killed this child. Right? Now, wouldn't that be obvious? That'd be obvious. Except that you have to tell me that there's onus. It's beyond his capability. He didn't ask for it. This is what happened. This is 100% what happened. But that's easy to understand. That's direct impact. But the fact that he made someone feel bad, right? He made somebody feel bad indirectly. He made someone feel bad. Now, you can say maybe it's direct because of the act that he did. Whatever, but it's indirect. Not totally direct. But even without that, you want to tell me his progeny going to suffer later? For the sole reason that what? That he caused somebody pain. So we don't understand what we do against others. Or even vice versa. Things happen to us. Yeah. Now, a lot of times, or even sometimes, the person who did it, they may not care. They 100% may not care. You'll say, okay, it happened, this, that. Yeah, and they had intention. And don't care. Yeah, so then there's an obvious question. If that's true, and they're coming after me for seemingly things I didn't do, let's say. So obviously something else going on. But the person could ask the question, why me? Why do I have to go through this? Why do they have to come after me? Now, really, they'd say, let it go after someone else. Why me? And they go after someone else? Okay, person can ask the same question. What do you want from me? So obviously there's many, many things that we see that we don't understand, that we don't have a clue about. But at the end of the day, what do we believe? And we should believe as strong as fire. Not always so easy. But what should we believe? That God's in charge. Right? And God runs the world. But we see a lot of things don't make sense. A lot of things. Yeah, it's not for us to question. We have to navigate this world, to live in this world. Yeah, we see a lot of things we don't understand. But at the end of the day, we have to ask the question, do we believe God runs the world or he doesn't? Or is it, God forbid, all haphazard? Right? What's the case? And when we see tragedy, and we see things we don't understand, what's the first thing a person's going to do? Question it. They'll question it. Why should this be? It's an age-old question. It's not for this generation. Yeah, been asked, previous generations. Yeah, 1,000 years ago, a question was asked. But we have the book of Job in general. Right? But what does God say at the end of the book of Job? He says, you don't understand how I work. Right? We say in the Haftorah of every fast day, every minor fast day, my ways are not like yours. The way I think is not the way you think. Now, that's not a leap of faith. Yeah. God is much greater than us, and he knows what's best for us as we believe. And obviously he knows what he's doing. But what's the obvious problem? It's hard. Because we don't fathom that. Right? Many people have died. They say, I'm going to come back and I'm going to go in front of in front of God's heavenly throne. And I'm going to plead, that God, bring the Messiah and all that. And everyone says the same thing when they come to someone in a dream. I went up there, I had all my questions, whatever. And then I saw things so clear, all my questions went away. Yeah. But but what do you do in a physical body? What's the person going to do in this world? They're going to plead for mercy. They're going to say, we need Mashiach. We need the Messiah. Yeah. Now, that's not a contradiction. Right? And that's what we do have to do. But we see, we're not in heaven. We don't see the ultimate the ultimate thing, the way God runs the world. We don't see that. God, we're not prophets, not the son of prophets. We don't see, we don't understand. Again, that's not a compound. There's a bigger picture, right? But again, what's the hardest part about seeing the biggest picture? Even if I understand, let's say to a certain extent, even if I understand, when a person is getting sledgehammered, it's hard to see. It's very hard to see. And this is exactly what the evil inclination wants. Now, the evil inclination can either break somebody, God forbid, or it can give someone such strength to want to continue, and it makes them who they are. Defines who they are. I think most people would agree. They've gone through certain hardship, whatever the hardship may be, or many hardships, doesn't matter, right? It could be multiple things. Whatever they've gone through, right? Whatever they've gone through, it doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, they would admit, probably most people would admit, that going through it defined who they were, made them who they were. Now, if you were to ask them the $1 million question, and that is, would you have opted for this? Is this something that you truly would have desired? Now, most people would say no. 100% they would say no. We say every day in the morning, don't bring me to trials and tribulations. But what's the catch-22? If you don't have trials and tribulations, you don't grow. That's the catch-22. So these trials make us who we are. So when we do have that trial, when the evil inclination's knocking, breaking down our door, We can say a little prayer and say, God, thank you very much for this challenge. Thank you very much for this challenge. Because I'm going to pass it 100%. And I'm not going to give in. And it's hard. I'm not going to say it's not hard. But the bottom line is our mentality has to change. First, 97% of the game, as we always say, 97% of the game is knowing how to view it. Yeah. Knowing what it is. Knowing the truth. Then I have to put knowing the truth into my heart. I have to put it into my heart, and I got to make it a reality. That's a much harder thing to do. Because normally we would say there's a mind-to-heart disconnect. The mind can know what to do. Most people today don't have a clue what to do, right? But if we know what to do, what we're supposed to do, then we have to go on that path no matter what. Because at the end of the day, as my Rebbe said, he told me many years ago, all these bus bombings going on, this and that. That was very much into politics. I said, we had this government, this, that, whatever. You're like, stop me. And he said, listen. He said, are you happy 95% of the way God runs the world? I thought about it, and I was like, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, he said, the other 5% you're not going to understand 10 lifetimes. Right? Doesn't matter. This tragedy just happened last week. So he came out and said, we don't know. We don't know how God works and how he runs the world. They got people, some person, gave up a seat in the car so he could take the bus, and he's going to learn. You have other stories, other unbelievable stories where it shouldn't happen to them. He's talking about great people here. So what did he say? He said, we don't understand. Now, that doesn't mean God doesn't run the world. Right? But we are the most dogged people in the world. Right? And being Jew comes at a price. And that we have to uphold what God says. And we're God's chosen people, for better or for worse. Christian can say, we're not challenged, we're not, we're not chosen anymore. And the Muslims say that. Doesn't matter. We are still God's chosen people. We have we have our obligation to be as close to him as possible. But being close to the king, you get burnt. You can really get burnt. So you got to be careful. You got to be very, very careful. You got to be careful what you think. You got to be careful what you say. But isn't God going to have mercy? Yeah, God can have a lot of mercy. Can have a lot of mercy. These things happen. Why? He ran out of mercy. So instead, he could have taken 10,000. Could have taken 5,000. Instead, as the verse says in Shir Shir, in the Song of Songs, so he plucked some of the roses. Some of the grapes he plucked instead of making something work. Now, it doesn't mean they were born for that. Right? It doesn't mean, they're going to, they're atoning for our sins. That's part of it. But they're not born for that, right? It's a Christian idea. Totally not born for that. Nonetheless, sometimes that's what happens. But it leads people reeling. It leads people thinking. Happens to them, what's going to be with us? Yeah. And why, and what does the evil inclination say? See? It's all random. You don't know. There's people left behind families. It's very tragic. It is. Right? People seeing it. It is, for sure. We don't know what goes on in heaven. We don't know these cheshbonos, these calculations. Right? And I would say, not everyone, would probably agree with this, but I would say if God opened our eyes for one split second, we'd probably drop dead of a heart attack. If he showed us why things are going the way they are and this and that. Yeah. The next world will be much clearer. Okay. In this world, I'm convinced. Again, people don't have to agree. But I'm convinced that if God would tell them, this is why you have to go through this, that, and the other thing, I'm not so sure people would be ecstatic. They'll say, okay, thank you very much. I'm glad I know. Makes me feel so much better. I don't know. Again, people can disagree. I would think that would destroy them. But partially. If they were to know something 2 years ago, all of a sudden now comes to fruition, because they said something, they looked at something, who knows what, God said, okay, I had enough mercy, but now I'm going to take it out this way, that way. I don't know. I'm not convinced the person's gonna say, wow, that's the reason. Now I know. Yeah, I think they'd be kind of broken by it. Because now they'll understand the measure for measure, right? But it could have been something like, really? I'm getting punished for that? In the bigger scheme of things? Yeah, they scratch their head and say, like, it's not going to help them, right? Other people would say, I want to know. I desperately want to know. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm not, like I said, I'm not convinced. I'm certainly not convinced. But at the end of the day, as we always say, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know, right? Moshe Rabbeinu wants to know God's attributes. What does God tell him? No one can see my face and live. That's what he told him. You can only see things from, you can only see me from behind. What does that mean? People never know. We'll never know truly why. And that's not a cop out either. We're human. How's the person supposed to figure all these things out? Well, it's like chaos. Countries rise, countries fall, wars, famines, this, that, people displaced, thousands of people killed. I don't understand. We never don't understand. But again, what does that do though? What does that create in the world? Something that Amalek brought to the world. Amalek brought two things to the world. Amalek brought the idea that there's no supernatural. Right? That's what killed Haman when he was being pinned. Gemara says being pinned on Esther's couch, pinned down by angels. And God opened his eyes, see there were angels pinning him down. Achashverosh walks in, obviously still doesn't want to kill him. It's like, what? You gonna take my wife in front of my face? What's he gonna say? Angels are pinning me down? He's Amalek. Yeah, he doesn't believe in supernatural. That's one thing. What's the other thing that is also pretty bad? What did Amalek bring to the world? Amalek brought to the world this idea of doubts. Because the numerical value of Amalek, Ayin Mem Lamed Kuf, is the same numerical value as Safek. Samach Pei Kuf. Right? We call that gematria. Each letter has a numerical value, right? Alpha is 1, Base is 2, Gimel is 3. The same numerical value. Now, why is that bad? Why is that bad? You tell me, believe in supernatural, non-belief in supernatural, atheism is worse. Right? Is worse. Yeah? But at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, what happens? Person wants to be in control. Person wants to know why things happen. They don't want to be in doubt. Because what does doubt do? Causes a lot of problems. A lot of problems. You're not sure. Maybe this is true. Maybe the other thing is true. And when a person's in doubt, they don't know what to do. They don't have a clue what to do. Right? And that's worse. At least if I know this is the right way, this is the wrong way, good. Right? Or I get advice, someone's an expert in this, they can give me advice on such a thing. Nobody wants to be in doubt. Right? And there's a lot of doubt in the world. What we see, the evil inclination wants to show, there's doubt. How do you know the Torah is really true? And look at all the things that happen to Jewish people. And look at this, and look at that, look at the other thing. Yeah, the evil inclination, very good at what it does. Doesn't need me to agree. Very good at what it does. And what does it want to do? It wants to enter into a person's mind and give him doubts. I was read a story earlier. Somebody that was adopted and brought up religious. Brought up as an Orthodox Jew, ended up converting. And that adopted father in mid-60s gets a brain tumor. Yes, everything that they were through, that they've been through. The person asked the question, like, this is the way it ends? Now, is that a good question or a bad question? Right? What's the person calling out for? Clarity. They want clarity. It's hard to see clarity when people suffer. It's hard to see clarity when a person has doubts. Yeah? So there is ultimate truth. That's not the question. But when you have doubts in your mind, and we're not as insular, and these things affect us, let's say, it causes us to question. You say, wow, this is the merit. This is the rewards. That was what the students of Rabbi Akiva asked. As the Gemara says. Yeah, as, he's having his flesh, flesh ripped out of him. And he said, I was always bothered by this verse, that, in the Shema, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul. So he said, I was waiting to establish this verse, my soul, God just take my soul. Yeah, sanctify God's name. Now, obviously, not everyone agreed with him. Yeah, that's what we're here for. But, if there's an obligation that you have to give up your life, sanctify God's name. So that's what you have to do. Not that we want to, but we'll do it. Right? We will absolutely do it if we have to. Okay. Now, even if that's true, he's giving the sermon as he's being killed. Right? So his students asked him, Rabbi Ad Khan, this is what it means. This is what the verse means. He went through his whole sermon as he's dying. He's out, bothered by this verse, whatever. Again, I'm not saying everybody agreed with him. But in the end, as he's giving this over, he says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. He dies, and a heavenly voice comes out and says, Rabbi Akiva is welcome in the next world. Very hard to understand. Because they asked him, Rabbi Akiva, students asked him, this is the Torah, this is the merit. This is the merit for learning Torah. And he said, I was bothered by the verse. He goes his whole sermon. Yeah, what's the bottom line? Say things we don't understand. Could that put serious doubt in a person's mind? Could. Very well could. Or does a person say, okay, God knows what he's doing. We don't understand. Right? We're too small to understand. Because we're too small to understand. So I made a question. This is what God did. Yeah? Tragic. Everyone's going to look at it as being tragic. Sure. But there's an ultimate plan. We're not always privy, or never just about privy to the ultimate plan. Maybe we see things generations later. We say, we see a domino effect. This had to happen. Other thing had to happen. You had to have a lot of things happen. Yeah? You need a lot of things to happen to get to this point. So there's order. As people are going through it, you're going to say there's no order. It's chaos, right? Yeah, we just came out of 9/11, right? All these memorials to 9/11, right? Very good. Yeah, before 9/11, would anyone would have imagined there's going to be this seemingly this war between Islam and the Western world? Nobody would have made such a connection. You can say the writing was on the wall, other things, whatever. But until that happened, and then, America destroyed half of, Afghanistan looking for bin Laden or whatever, claiming this is not a war against Islam, very good. Nobody would imagine such a thing. And that they'd have this kind of power. Nobody. People say you got these think tanks, people would have said, yeah, we saw it coming, and then, okay, whatever. But in general, if you would have said that 60 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, something like this would happen, it'd be this major disagreement between Islam and the Western world, people thought you're crazy. They don't have this kind of power. Yeah? A bunch of nomads in most places. They don't do anything. All of a sudden they come into oil and they make money and whatever. Okay. But I'm saying, if you look at step by step, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, nobody would have imagined. Nobody. So they say, yeah, we predicted it. Good. Yeah, most people never would have imagined. Never. Yeah, but God's orchestrating things behind the scenes. And you put all these things together, one thing led to another, and then you have this. It took a lot of time. Okay. Yeah, it took time for it to develop. Good. But then it developed, and now it's a serious problem. All over it's a serious problem. Right? But you never would have imagined. But if you connect the dots, and now you look back, and now you see in hindsight, there's a plan. There was a plan to get to this point. Now, what's the idea? So the Malbim says more than 100 years ago, right? Brings out, I think, in Ezekiel chapter 38, speaks about the war of Gog and Magog. He says there's going to be the ultimate war between Yishmael, the Muslims, and Edom. Who's Edom? Sorry, Esau. And Esau. Who's Esau? Edom. Who's Edom? Edom represents the Western world. Yeah, 150 years ago, you're going to say, come on, really? They would have laughed at him. Totally would have laughed at him. They said, what are you talking about? Nice idea, not practical. Like, at the end of days, this is what it's going to be. I'm not saying this is going to be fine, this is exactly what it's going to be, but he sets it up. And they're going to be fighting. Why? Because they disagree in religion and other things. There's going to be a major bloodbath. And why are they fighting? They're going to say, oh, it's all because of Israel. They're going to march towards Jerusalem. That's when the Messiah comes. Now that looks plausible. I bet all the money I don't have probably start with that. Right? Or the Medrash says, there's going to be a war. It'll start with the king of Paras. Paras, modern day Iran. Could start that way. Either way, but you got all these cells of, Muslims, all over Europe, in other places. I mean, it's a powder keg. The whole world's a powder keg. 150 years ago, you would have laughed at this. Everybody would have laughed at this. Nobody would have predicted it. Nobody. You would have told the Malbim, wow, this is way out. This is, okay, interesting. This is the way you think it's going to go in the end of days. Anybody's guess. Nobody knows, right? Whoever knows ain't talking, but, he said this is what's going to happen. Okay. Very nice. 150 years ago, we would have thought it was a crackpot. You never would have thought of such a thing. But now you see, years later, you connect the dots, and now we are where we are. And how it goes, God knows. God knows what the final plan is. Nobody knows. And how far it's going to go. Everyone thought, Putin goes into Ukraine. That's going to be the end of days. It's going to be World War III. They got nuclear weapons, this and that. We see that's not what he wants. I mean, he wants to make Russia great, this and that. He's not, he's not going to take over the world. That's what we see. That's not the ultimate goal. They have enough trouble in Ukraine. They could have trouble other places also. But it doesn't matter. Right now, could that have been? Yeah, it could be. Does it look like it's going to be that? I don't think so. I'm saying anything can happen. Nobody knows. The world's in chaos. Absolute chaos. Sometimes better, sometimes not. But at the end of the day, we're not in charge. We're not in charge. What's the point? The point is you don't know how to look at the world in God's eyes. Moshe Rabbeinu says to God, I want to understand your attributes. I want to understand how you run the world. And what does God say? What does God say in the book of Exodus? No one can see my face and live. We're never going to know. We're never going to know how he runs the world. Yeah, and we're living in a world of Hester, but no Hester upon him. Once the temple was destroyed, God's presence wasn't felt. Right? It's not direct. It's hiddenness within hiddenness. Right? That's what Hester upon him means. God's hidden, hiding his face. He's not showing why, how, where. He's hiding his face. And we don't fathom anything. Right? We don't fathom anything. Yeah. People can't even say what they want. They get shut down. People get killed for expressing the truth. Okay. Yeah. People pay a price. It's true. Fortunately, it's true. It's crazy. Right? It's a crazy world we live in. But, God's setting up for whatever he's setting up for. What's my obligation? My obligation beyond the shadow of a doubt is I got to keep what he says. I got to do what he says no matter what. Even if it's hard, even if I don't understand, I have to do what he says. That's my focus. My focus is that, I got to learn as much Torah as possible. I can be the best person I can be. I have to work on, dealing with others, my relationship with God. Important things. That's what I have to focus on. These other things, very easy to get sidetracked. Right? As the Ramchal says, very, very easy to get sidetracked. That's what the evil inclination wants. He's trying to figure out this, figure out that. What am I going to do? You got to live. Kind of like you eat to live, you live to eat. Okay, but you got to live. And how are you supposed to live? The way God wants. Got a week before Rosh Hashanah. It should be a very intense time now. Now, people taking stock of, what they want to fix, how they want to fix it, taking stock on, very seriously. Because the time of judgment's coming. That's the most important thing if you had a court case next week. We're at a court case in 3 days, even. You're turning over the world in order that you get a favorable judgment. I think today in the human court, maybe it's easier because you can bribe people. Okay. Doesn't always work. Right? But let's say, okay. Yeah, God cannot be bribed. There are no bribes. Since there are no bribes, we're on our own. 100% we're on our own. It's going to be based on our own merits, or God forbid not. And we invoke in these days, more than any other time during the year, God's certain attributes. Attributes of mercy. And we need mercy. You say, well, the times before are much worse. Every generation has their thing. This is pretty bad now. I don't think anyone's going to say not that way. They're war with Iran, still dealing with Hamas. You got the Houthis, they want to still show they're alive. But it's not just danger in Israel. Yeah, it's dangerous everywhere. Yeah, there is one difference here, right? I mentioned this last week, but I said it many times. There's one major difference. The major difference is here in Israel, we know who the enemy is. Very clear who the enemy is, right? It's very rare, unless, people are in gangs or there's crime or whatever. Jews don't act against other Jews, usually. Not going to steal, not going to kill them. Again, a Jew who's more like a non-Jew than a Jew, that can happen. Right? Drugs, crime, other things. Okay. Yeah. The Orthodox community is no crime. There's no crime. Essentially. But you know who the enemy is. It's very clear who the enemy is. Go anywhere in the world. Anywhere in the world. You have no idea. Sitting on a bus. Going on a train. You have no idea what someone could do or not do. You have no idea. That's a major difference. Major difference. But anything can happen anytime. So what do? A person got to be careful, right? They can't be stupid, that's for sure. You got to be careful. But at the same time, God says that, we're not allowed to be afraid. Right? It's contradictions. One verse says, you are allowed to be afraid. Other verse says, you're not allowed to be afraid. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is, the Gemara says, what am I allowed to be afraid of? Only thing I'm allowed to be afraid of is if I forget Torah. And how many people are afraid of that? How many people learning, however much they learn, how much are they worried they're going to forget what they learn? Right? Theoretical question. That's what you have to be afraid of. Does God, in general, want you to be afraid walking down the street? No. Are there times you're going to have to take precautions and be smart? Yes. Yeah, but it doesn't want you to be afraid in this world. This world is what it is. I'm going to put my best foot forward. Not a guarantee for anything. I still have to put my best foot forward. Okay. But at the end of the day, what do I do? What do I have to do? That's what God tells me to do. To get up, I have to pray, I have to make blessings, this, that, certainly for a Jew. Right? Plenty of things for non-Jews to do also. Yeah, that's what I have to do. Being afraid is not one of them. Not one of them. We have to understand God runs the world. Okay. I need to do what I'm supposed to do. I think any of these people the other day, or last week, or whatever it was, they left, they didn't think they were coming home. I can't imagine. No one's got a death wish. Person walks out the door, they think they're coming home. Why not? Not a leap of faith. A person doesn't expect to be in a terrorist attack, person doesn't expect to have a heart attack, other things. But does anyone have any guarantee you walk out that door? No. There's no guarantee. It's because, things happen the way they did today or yesterday or the day before, tomorrow, totally different day. You have no idea. No idea. One day I went in. Last week I was stuck in a bus for 3 hours. Yeah, half an hour ride. Yeah, it was before the terrorist attack. There was like a 6-car accident. 6-car accident stuck in a parking lot, like a parking lot on the highway. Was that expected? No. Terrorist attack expected? No. Okay, gotta deal with it. Whatever. Whatever it is. So these are hard things. These are hard things to see. These are hard things to fathom. Okay, doesn't mean God's not in charge. Yeah, but what's the evil inclination going to do? So the evil inclination is gonna make your mind go wild. That's what it's going to do. It's crazy because essentially it's going to try and convince you to do all kinds, just to think things that go against Torah. And people say the majority of people don't do this, and you should do this, and you're going to cause more enemies by doing it. What all the non-Jewish and secular Jewish anti-Semites say, you'd be more like everybody else. We don't show we're too Jewish. This, that, everything will be good. But it's not true. Right? Secular Jews that were killed during the Holocaust couldn't understand. Why do you want to kill us? Yeah, we're like you. We go to universities. We eat your food. We fought in your wars. We marry your women. What's the problem? What may be brought out, may rot, wherever he is. What did he say? Doesn't matter. You have quarter Jewish blood, half Jewish blood. You all deserve to die. Doesn't matter. Right? You want to be like them, they'll hate you more. Right? That's been the reality of anti-Semitism throughout history. Yeah, in every nation. Every nation's thrown at the Jewish people. The Jewish people go there. Right? They end up there. Yeah. They become very successful. Right? A lot of times. Or even not. Sometimes, not that way. And then people say, oh, you're just sucking the dry, from the economy. Others will say, oh, if they're too rich, they're doing this. Like anti-Semitism is obviously not rational, right? It's not really, it's not really the point. But it's like, you look in the world and say, wow, God shows the people, what's going on? Look what's going on. Yeah, so other things don't make sense. Yeah, it's in the air, right? Esav hates Yaakov. That's the way it's going to be. That's the way it's going to be to the end of days. Yeah, someone said, if there are more Noahites in the world, that'll stop anti-Semitism. Not true. How do I know it's not true? It'll help if there are more, but the hatred's never going to stop until the Messiah comes. Once the Messiah comes and people don't have free choice, right? The evil inclination gets destroyed. Everyone doing the will of God, everyone playing the guitar, singing Kumbaya, beautiful. Until that point, you're going to have this hatred. Sometimes better, sometimes worse. Yeah, whatever it is, but it'll never totally disappear. Yeah, if there were more Noahites in the world, beautiful. That would help. 100% that would help, but it's not going to disappear. 100% it's not going to disappear. Yeah. So you can say, well, life's kind of depressing, isn't it? Yeah. But how do I view it? I still got to look forward, right? I got to prepare for Rosh Hashanah. I got to learn as much as I can. I got to learn Musar as much as I can. I have to change. I have to work hard. Okay. Do things always go the way we think? Probably not. Probably not. But, there are two things there. We, the Jewish people, we have to do what we need to do. Non-Jews have to do what they need to do. And God needs to do what he needs to do. Like Mary said, if you're happy the way God runs the world 95% of the time, the other 5% you won't understand in 5 lifetimes. You won't understand. And we're too puny to understand. It's not a cop-out. Yeah. People think, you see the world, you look at the world, you look at every continent, you see what's going on. Some places have it better, some places have it worse. Yeah. And as great as a political analyst as someone's going to be, you really think they're going to have the answers? And why, why Putin went into Ukraine all of a sudden, a few years back? Why all of a sudden now? Why didn't he do it 10 years ago? Why didn't he do it 5 years ago? Or why didn't he do it 2 years from now? Why specifically now? whatever. People come up with their ideas. Come up with Webster's fifth definition, eighth definition, right? They'll come up with their own ideas. Yeah, he needs to consolidate power. He needs to look good. He needs it. That's why I need to do it now. Okay. Now, who's right? Probably nobody. Yeah. With all these, political people and this and that, and they know how he thinks backwards and forwards and this and that. Oh, they're conjecturing. That's what they're doing. It's all conjecture. Yeah. Yeah. But this is all part of the big plan. How's the part of the big plan? I can't answer. If I knew that, I would be doing what I'm doing. Be world famous. Yeah. We don't know what what the big plan is. Yeah. But we see. These are cogs in the wheel. Now I would have thought, if what the Malbim says is true, I would have thought there's a big coalition, in Britain, Germany, other places that's, lining up to help Israel against Iran and this and that. Very good. Yeah. So I would have thought, okay, if that's going to be the case, then what's going to happen? They may say, if they get attacked in other places, the Americans, the Brits, whatever, get attacked, they're going to say, why are we going to take losses? Why should we have to go through this? This is our problem, it's not our problem. Why do we have to defend? Could have gone that way, in theory. Yeah, but it didn't go that way. Okay. But that could have happened. I thought in the back of my mind, okay, let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see how long this coalition stays. Yeah. Let's see how long the coalition stays. Yeah. But I would have thought if people died, people would have been killed from this coalition. And they were like, significant amounts of people being killed, on a daily basis. This could have called into question the whole plan. Why are we got them? We're sitting ducks over here. Now they're attacking us. Yeah. Why should our people die? It's their problem. They have to fight against them. They, could have happened that way. Right? Definitely could have happened that way. Okay, it didn't. So, so what's the ultimate plan? I don't know. Right? Anybody know? Yeah, he put Trump in power. He's going to help Israel as much as possible. Good. Yeah, he claims wasn't so happy what they did in Qatar. But he's not changing. He's not going to take away. He's not going to take away weapons, other things like, other people if they were in power. What they would have done. Okay, he's staying the long game. Very good. Probably, best president according to everybody. According to everybody for Israel, I don't think there's anything to talk about. Anyone combined, right? You just, flush them for powers given Israel. Okay, but that's not even the point. Yeah, that's not even the point. But even so, when his patience worth it? Yeah, other nations, for sure the patience is worth it. Especially what Israel's doing in Gaza now. Yeah, it's worn thin for a long time. Okay. But he's still holding course. Very good. Does that mean he can't change? He can't change his mind. He can change his mind tomorrow if he wants. Yeah, he could. Right? That coalition could have come back to bite them. Could have. But didn't. For whatever reason. Whatever reason didn't. Right? I thought it was kind of interesting to see what's going to happen. Right? See in the end what's going to happen. Are they going to stay tight or are they going to crumble? Yeah, and Israel's probably better off in many ways, like just be on their own anyway. But now that you have all these people want to help you, okay, it might come at a price. Let's see how it plays out. Did it play out the way I thought? No. Definitely not. You say you're not a political analyst. Okay. Never claimed to be one. Yeah, but I'm just saying, it's interesting to see how all the pieces fit together. And when you look at the puzzle, you're going to say, really? This is how it's going to go down, and this is what's going to be, and, and all these other things. Nobody would imagine. That's the whole point. Nobody would imagine that that's what's going to be and how it's going to be. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we got to learn. We got to say Tehillim, right? We have to say Psalms. We got to learn Musar. We got to be better. It all depends on us, for better or for worse. It all depends what I do. Says the Rambam, my actions matter. Every town, every city, every state has a scale. Scales are always going up and down. My action right now matters. If I do the right thing, the scale goes one way. If I do the wrong thing, the scale goes the other way. You can say, what about other people? Forget about other people. You got an obligation for yourself. Now, can I bring other people closer? I can try, whatever, right? But it starts with us. It starts with how we think. It starts with what we do. It starts with our actions. Our actions have tremendous repercussions, right? That is true. So according to the Rambam, that says our actions matter and scale goes one way or the other. Why don't people think this way? Why don't they live their lives like that? Why don't they live their lives? They have a chance to learn Torah and waste time. Why don't they think like the whole world depends on my decision right now? Why don't people live their lives and think that? One of two reasons. It's either they're lazy, which is probably the answer. It's they're lazy and the evil inclination gets them, or they don't believe in it. They don't truly believe in it. They'll say the words, they'll learn the words, very good. Living it, it's a lot harder. Like, come on. Noah wasn't given a Malchei Shares. Noah wasn't given to angels, very good. Does God expect me to be on that level? Why not? I'm talking huge levels here. But why doesn't a person think what they do matters? So you tell me, we think we're an infinitesimally small speck of cosmic dust. I grew up in a city, in a town, in a state, in a country, on a continent, on a planet, on a galaxy. We're getting smaller. You're going to think, come on, my action matters in the bigger scheme of things? My action matters. It has effects. It can have good effects. It can have bad effects. Yeah, but what I do matters. What I say matters. What the repercussions of my actions are matter. And we have no idea, as we said at the beginning, we have no idea how far ramifications go for what we do. In other words, the greater we are, the greater the ramifications. You see by Yaakov Avinu. You see by Yaakov what happened. He was used, and what he did caused Esav to cry. But he wasn't his mother, and she had prophecy. So it wasn't his fault. Okay. But his progeny get punished later. It's a mind-boggling thing. The repercussions for our actions, we can't imagine. Right? Person could never imagine. Vari Kaplan, blessed memory, his book Made in Heaven. Yeah, so Vari Kaplan says, a person gets married, it's a book about marriage, right? So he says, person gonna get married, right? Person says, person, whoever they're gonna marry, there are repercussions. Yeah, that decision doesn't just affect you, it affects your spouse, affects your kids, affects your grandkids. So I was like, who, me? Shut the book. I didn't get past the introduction. Yeah, that's intense, right? That is very, very intense. Repercussions for these actions, right? And these repercussions are huge. They're absolutely huge. Anyone really think about it? Don't think about it. They think, this person I want to be with, this person I want to marry. Okay. Let's say that's the case. Let's say that's the case. They have a couple kids that don't exactly go the way you want. They don't go the same way you want. Yeah, in many ways. And raising them is very hard and very problematic and other things. Okay. Was it worth it? A lot of things we think go out the window. Go out the window. As a Yiddish expression, we plan, God laughs. And that's the truth. A lot of people out there redoing their bathrooms, busy redoing their bathrooms, yeah. So we make all these plans. Think we're going to do this, think we're going to do that. What's going to happen later? And then all of a sudden someone gets a bad diagnosis. Yeah? All those plans out the window. Or a person just lost a job. Or, I know of a story. Somebody worked, day and night, weekends, this, that, had a nice nest egg, and their money got abused, got lost in the IRA. Their IRA got, I don't know, something happened to it. Something happened, bad investments, whatever it was, they're left with nothing. So now they really can't work. They missed a lot of their, a lot of family functions because they worked, and they worked overtime and different things. So, they go to retire. What are they expecting? A nice nest egg. Yeah, now they have nothing. Now they have like a goose egg now, right? So you're gonna say, what's the lesson? Well, be careful where you put money. That's one lesson. But what's the lesson? However much money you're supposed to make, you make, regardless of whether you work overtime or not. If God says you're going to have a certain amount of money, so you worked overtime, you might lose. You might lose it in other ways, right? I'm not saying all of it. Person might have medical bills. Person might have, car bills, other things, whatever it may be. Right, so that's the money you're supposed to make. So you can't, there's no getting what you don't deserve. You're gonna say, but I had this money, whatever. So now imagine this person was broken. This person literally was broken. And they said, I work my whole life. I work like a dog. Yeah, I miss family events, different things, and I have nothing to show now. Because what would they have to show? You know what they'd have to show? This big fat amount of money in the bank. So they, or in this IRA, so they could travel and do whatever. They can't even do that. So now their whole life, imagine their whole life at this point, up in smoke. Totally up in smoke. They work like a dog for years, for decades. Yeah, foregoing many important things because they had to work. Okay. You'll say the ends justify the means. It's worth it. Because in the end, even though they miss certain family events or whatever it is, they still, making money. They're making good money. Very good. They're gonna have that to be able to travel, be able to live easy, and it was worth it. Then it all went up in smoke. It all went up in smoke. So what happened? They're broken. But then they understood this was God's will, whatever. They wanted to convert. They ended up converting, I don't think. But, they wanted to go in this path. Because now they realized what they did before had no meaning. They never would have come to this conclusion. Certainly, if all the money was there. Now, it could be, I don't remember the story 100%. Could be they were looking into things anyway, but it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They come to this conclusion now, beyond the shadow of a doubt. Other people would have been just totally broken by it, said, my bad luck and this and that. And would have yelled and screamed and this and that for, forever because of what happened. Of course, they're upset. They were bitter, understood. But where's the bitterness come in here? The bitterness comes in when they realize their life was a sham. That's the bitterness. And that they wasted life. They wasted their entire life, the ability to work and make money, everything, and they lost everything in the end. What would I compare it to? When the Jews were in Egypt, what did the Egyptians do to make it hard for them? And the Egyptians made them build houses and certain things, but they built them on land that wouldn't be able to hold it. So, so Jews were killed because these things weren't sturdy. But a lot of times they build things only to see just fall on the ground. That breaks a person. Yeah, that absolutely breaks a person. In other words, the hard work that they're doing, and they're being whooped and everything else, all the hard work they're doing is for nothing. There's nothing, it's nothing worth a person's like, and we don't even know this, when it comes to business and other things. We don't even realize that, there are things we're working towards and we don't see it, maybe till later, if we're lucky that what we're doing is really building nothing. It's really like building a sandcastle. Yeah, but we don't see that. Sometimes you see it, but a lot of times you don't see it till the end. So imagine what happens to a person's psyche at that point. Person's been building, striving, this, that, and it was all nothing. It was all nothing. Right? How many people gave Madoff money? Yeah. And the whole thing, okay. Right? The whole thing from the beginning was a Ponzi scheme. They didn't know that. And if he was giving some people back money and this and that, right? It was just to quote unquote reassure them till he couldn't do it anymore, right? So it was false assurance, and then came and lost. Yeah. Now some people lost everything. Yeah, they got swindled. You know, but imagine how that's going to make a person feel. They're relying on somebody. They worked hard for their money, and then all the money they worked hard for just disappears overnight. It's tragic. That's trauma. Yeah, but this is a very good example because here you have someone who got the message. They got the message in the end. And that is, what's this world all about? What am I doing here? Padding my bank account when it's probably going to be given to other people when I die? When a person dies? Okay. You want to make money. You want to have, you don't have to be able to live off her. You don't have to work so hard. Very good. Yeah, but at the end of the day, is that the end to end all things? You'll tell me. You got to prepare. You got to put money away. You got to do this. Okay. Yeah, but is that the end to end all things? So imagine. I mean, I can't even imagine, the pain this person went through. I mean, I know. I spoke to them. I know. But they were in tears saying, my whole life has been a sham. My whole life was for nothing. My whole life, I worked so hard. I have nothing to show for it. I did my best to build them up. They wasn't really totally for naught, and now you understand, and whatever. But they were coming on this path, I think, anyway. But this solidified things because they realized they're not in charge. They realized there's a bigger scheme going on. And they never could have prevented that. There would have been no way for them to know that was going to happen. Obviously, if they would have seen signs, this and that, okay. Then they were stupid for what they did, fine. But they weren't able to see. God hid it from them. Why did they hide it from them? Right? Build them up, and then cut their legs underneath from them. Why? Can't answer. Whatever the person had to go through. This could destroy somebody. I'm surprised, extremely surprised at that point they just didn't kill themselves. Yeah. Because now the embarrassment, the ultimate embarrassment of what they went through. And now it's going to affect their family. Yeah, and people around them. It's a horrific thing. Yeah, an absolute horrific thing. But at the end of the day, they got the message. It's not about them. It's they think they're in control. Right? They think they're in control. And and they see how this IRA is growing. Right? And what the number is. It's all false. But they see it. They saw it, they're happy, all the self-sacrifice is worth it, all these things, beautiful. Right? And at the end of the day, they want to cash it out, whatever it is, they come up with a goose egg. A major goose egg. Again, most people probably, they would have gone out of their minds. They would have absolutely gone out of their minds. Is this what I worked so hard for? I didn't see my kids' birthday parties. I didn't see this. Look what I sacrificed for, and I have nothing. If they were left with a little bit, okay, salvage something. They weren't left with nothing. With nothing. There's no way to get it back. There's no recourse. Right? That's the best. So, okay, something happened. You get back. You get back nothing. Person sees they work so hard and you don't have anything to show for all the things you worked hard for and all the sacrifice, that's breaking a person. That is absolutely breaking a person. So again, I'm not in God's mind why he did it. Yeah, and what the purpose was. Well, I think I know what the purpose was. Yeah, could be wrong, but I think that was the purpose. Show them. You have to show them that's not what life's about. But see, this person got the message. Other people would have said, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. Would have been beside themselves. It would have been broken. Like, how's the person going to function in such a way? They're expecting to live the life of Riley, go here, go there. I mean, obviously, within reason. And they got burnt. And they got seriously burnt. So this person got the message. They got the message. But imagine the pain. Imagine the pain. Wouldn't it have been better if God would have showed them a different way? They have to go through such pain. That's what God decided to do, right? It's not for us to question why do it this way, could done that way, could done, other ways. We can ask the question. God sent the Jewish people into Egypt. Egypt, one of the most immoral people there that they were. Speak about that tomorrow in the book of Leviticus, right? Don't go in the way of the Egyptians. Why did he send them there? Why in the world did he send them there? They almost reached the 49th level of impurity. Almost got to the last level of impurity. God takes them out. Right? Takes them out after 210 years. They're supposed to be there for 400 years. Doesn't God know what they're going to do and assimilate and, or potentially assimilate out? Only 20% of the Jewish people come out. It's also a mind-boggling thing. Yeah. They didn't want to leave. Right? I can speak tomorrow in Book of Leviticus, chapter 18. 9 o'clock Eastern time. I'm going to speak about it. If I should be able to speak about it. The fact that they didn't want to go to the land of Israel. Even though God promised us, come to the land of milk and honey, this and that. They didn't want to go. Right? Until God pushed them and they had to go. God tells you it's going to be the greatest place. Why aren't you going to go? You can tell me, come on, it's a desert. They don't know what to expect. And, it's like, before they as they go in the desert, they're like, well, we missed the fish. We missed the watermelon in Egypt. Do you forget what happened in Egypt? Like, they have short-term memory. Right? They remember what happened? How they suffered? Yeah. So what's the simple explanation? What did we say before? Doubts. They're going in the desert. The manna came yesterday. Manna came day before. Came 3 days before. A week before. A month before. Who say it's coming tomorrow? Why wouldn't God provide? Right? So not that they didn't have faith. I mean, there was a lack of faith in a certain way. Right? But what did they think? Maybe people said, we're not going to be worthy. We're going to die in the desert. Because they didn't see anything else around them. Right? They eat them on, very good. They're full for the rest of the day. Old Mother Hubbard ain't nothing in the cupboard. What's going to be? What's going to be? There's no oasis. There's no food. There's no nothing. How are they going to get, how are they going to be provided for? What do you think? God's going to leave them in the lurch? Again, this was a test. This was an absolute test. And they failed at a certain level. Greatest generation in the history of man. Saw God face to face at Mount Sinai, whatever that means. Mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. Complain about the fish. They missed the watermelon. They want to eat meat. They didn't have sin to despise. We're like grasshoppers in their eyes. Yeah, they spent 40 years in the desert because of it. 40 years in the desert, and we suffer. We suffer, the Jewish people, because the Gemara says they cried for nothing, and they were lacking faith. So God says, "Oh, you're crying for this? I'll give you something generations to cry about." That's all the tragedies of the fast and ninth of all. You say, "Ma Kesha, why?" They questioned. Or they thought, or they had a certain lack of faith. God was working on them to flex their emunah muscles. And they failed. At a certain level, they failed. Had they done what they were supposed to do and be held at the level they were supposed to be at, and God's working on their emunah muscles, they would have gone straight into the land. Straight into the land. Messiah would have come. That's it. That would have been it. What happened? We know what happened. They sinned with the spies. Because of the sin of the spies, what happens? They're in the desert 40 years. That generation has to die out. The Messiah could have come. So you can look at this in a few different ways. What were they missing in the desert? God took care of all their needs. The clothes never wore out. That's because of the clouds of glory. Whatever they ate, whatever they thought the man was, that's what it was. That was the taste they had. Pizza, meat, whatever it was. It's not the same. It's like, eating a cow, killing the cow, eating the cow, this, that. They're not the same. Yeah, because they have everything in front of them, right? Here, they don't have anything in front of them. All they have is dust, right? Dust and dirt to the left and the right. Right, reminds me when I went to Egypt many, many years ago. I keep seeing signs on a bus, keep seeing signs. 400 kilometers, 300 miles, to Cairo. What do you see? Dirt and dust. That's all you see. 200 kilometers, right? You're looking around, don't see anything, right? It's a desert, right? It's an absolute desert. 100 kilometers, what do you see? Nothing. 50 kilometers, what do you see? Nothing. Get about 10 kilometers out, you start to see civilization. Up until that point, it's all dust. Yeah, totally all dust. That's what they saw. They didn't see anything else. There's no oasis. There's no nothing. 100%, they had to believe God was going to take care of their needs. So where'd they fail? Where, at some level, where'd they fail? They failed to the point where, at some level, the lack of emunah. And they felt they're going to do something to sin, God forbid, and that is going to cause God to be angry. He's not going to take care of their needs, and they're going to die in the desert. That was the fear, right? That was the fear. Yeah. So based on that, God wanted that proper faith. Yeah, the God's still got to take care of the needs. But they felt maybe we'll do something wrong. Maybe we'll do something wrong. Okay. Yeah, it was based on their humility. But at some level, the problem with the moon at some level, right? Maybe it's not worthy anymore. Yeah, maybe other things, right? It's like Yaakov Avinu tells God, give me bread, give me shelter, take care of my needs. God says, oh, okay. Says no problem, right? When he goes against Esau, he asks again. Commentaries ask, why is he asking twice? Why is he asking twice? So Gemara says he's asking twice because maybe, God forbid, he's going to do something wrong. God won't find favoritism, right? Won't be favorable to him, and he'll suffer. Not because of lack of faith. Not because he doesn't believe God's going to take care of his needs. He believes God's going to take care of his needs. But essentially, what's he worried about? Maybe he'll do something to sin. If he does something to sin, that's it. And God won't take care of his needs. But he wanted that reassurance. Yeah, wouldn't we want that? Of course. We're giving all these reassurances and don't worry. But who says we're going to live up to what we're supposed to do? And what happens if we fall short? And God's not going to do what he needs to do. Measure for measure. So at the end of the day, let's say, for some people things are going very well. Let's say, very good. They should stay that way. There any guarantee tomorrow things aren't going to change? You say, today was good, tomorrow's better. Good. Day after that, even better. Okay. So let's say, for however long, things are good. Is that a guarantee staying that way? No. Even if things are good, a person should pray like they have nothing. They should pray like they have nothing. That's what they should do. Because they don't have a guarantee tomorrow what's going to be. You say, but if it's good today, tomorrow should also be good. Okay. What happens, let's say, a person has a certain business, they depend on traffic coming through and the road gets blocked off. They're working on the road. Now people can't get there. What's going to be? Yeah. Everything was good up until that point. Plenty of traffic, coming by, plenty of places to park, this, that, very good. Good location. All of a sudden, they're ripping up the street. It'll take 2 months. 2 months. People rerouted this and that. So now you're in a prime location, no one can see it. Because, hey, I got customers coming anyway, right? Customers will come, people tell them about it, this, that, but they're not getting the same level of traffic. Why not? Because they can't get there. Now you can tell me even if they knew about it, so what? Did they, were they ecstatic about it? Oh, probably not, right? They're in a prime location. Traffic is huge. People go by, they stop in. I'm saying everybody, whatever, but they get good amount of traffic because the road works. If the road's cut off and they can't get there, isn't that going to affect their business? Probably. Probably. Because could that have certainly a long-term effect? Could. Definitely a short-term effect, no question. But even when they're doing construction, this and that, they can say, yeah, it's only gonna take 2 weeks. It's only gonna take a month. Yeah, it could take 6 months. Right? Here in Israel, it's like the kiss of death. You say, yeah, it's only gonna take a month. It's only gonna take 2 months. That means it's gonna take like 3 years. Right? Depending. Depending. It depends on a lot of factors. There are a lot of people, my neighborhood, other neighborhoods relying on what do you call it? Relying on Arabs to build because that's what they do and they're cheaper labor, right? Also, and then you had all these attacks. They didn't allow Arabs in for a long time. So people were building, A, lost a lot of money, and B, didn't get what they wanted to build finished. They get stuck. A lot of people lost. And by the time they brought other people in, or whatever, the Chinese workers, Taiwanese workers, this, that, but still they were stuck. They were stuck. And some people, didn't recover. Didn't recover because of it. Yeah. So you can say, well, no guarantees in Israel, you just don't know what's going to be. Okay. But if things are okay and you have reliable workers, let's say, and you got this plan, you're all of a sudden you're going to expect something's going to happen and boom. You're not going to be able to bring them in and you can't continue. Right? It's unexpected. Definitely not. So whether you rely on Arab labor or not, it's a different issue, but not expected. Regardless of what happens, that's, it's like a last resort. You know what they'll do, but this went on for months. This went on for months. This is after COVID, well after COVID. Yeah, COVID wasn't the issue. But this went on for months. For months, people needed to build, people needed to finish. They lost money, they lost serious money. Is that something in general that you can foresee? No. Listen, sometimes things are better, things are worse. You don't expect that. You definitely don't, you don't expect something like that. And you can't plan for that. No possible way to plan for that. Right? Obviously, what's the best thing to do? Best thing to do would be to use Jewish workers. The problem with using Jewish workers is it costs twice the amount. It costs a lot more. Was it better to support them than support Arabs? Yeah. Depends how much money you have. Whatever. Right? That's the easy way. If you can do it that way. A lot of people are dependent on Arab workers, no question. So, in the back of your mind, should a person think, well, what if it doesn't work out and what if something happens? People aren't thinking that. Because for the most part, that doesn't happen. And if it does, it's certainly not very frequent. And it's not so common. Does it mean it can't happen? No. Well, when someone, let's say, someone plans to do a major renovation, let's say, or a renovation, you're relying on their labor. The bottom line. Yeah, you're relying on their labor. Now, if you see things politically going a certain way, maybe, yeah. So maybe before you start, you put it off a little bit. Then you see where it's going to go. Maybe. But let's say there are no signs that anything's going to happen. There are no signs. So what's the person going to do? Full steam ahead. Yeah, you have the money, you're going to put it out, do it, whatever. Good. Is that a guarantee? Not a guarantee. A lot of people lost their shirt based on it. Got to wait for months and a hard time. They need these things done. A lot of people doing it to rent out space or whatever. And first of all, it's taking longer to do. They don't have the money coming in now. If it should have been done, or however long it's going to take, caused a big problem. But that's something like that. That's a very good example. Is that something a person can foresee? Can't foresee, right? If there's already war going on, this and that, okay. That's a different issue. Nothing's going on. Nothing's really imminent. You're following the news, this and that. You don't expect anything to happen. The person full steam ahead. Then a few months later, as they're into things, something happens. But not something necessarily can be predicted. They say you're taking a chance, okay? Taking a chance. Yeah, but for the most part, it doesn't happen that way. For the most part. Yeah. But you can say it's a powder keg, anything could happen. True. So what are you gonna do? So again, you have one or two choices. One or two choices. Take the risk. Yeah, you take some level of risk. Or you find somebody that only has Jewish labor. And you say it's gonna cost me a lot more. Okay. But then you don't have a risk. You take the risk down totally. Even though it's gonna cost more. So, person say, well, I don't have the money. Okay. You don't have the money. The other way is some level of risk. It's true. It is some level of risk. But again, what's the point? The point is it's not something the person can foresee. Even a person willing to take the risk, let's say it's not a huge risk. Okay. If God wants you to lose, even if it's not such a big risk, could you lose? Could you lose? Is it something you can plan for? I don't know. I don't think it's something you can plan for. Because there are a lot of things that happen that you wouldn't have imagined, that you could not have foreseen. And what happens when you couldn't foresee it? God had you. And he wants you to lose. That's what he wants. How much? Doesn't matter. But he wants you to lose. Now, if it's something you could have done, you could have foreseen, and you missed information or whatever, then you can say, okay, God wanted you to miss it also. Yeah, but then you're going to say, everybody's going to say, oh, that's 10 times worse because I made the mistake. Right? You made the mistake. You weren't careful. You weren't cautious enough. Right? So that kind of takes God out of the picture in a certain way. You did something stupid, God didn't stop you. Okay. But you did it to yourself. Could that have been prevented? Yes, could have been prevented. Could have been prevented. But it wasn't. And why didn't God prevent it? Because you didn't have enough merit to prevent it. Let's say. You didn't have enough merit. Okay. There are a lot of things that are not in our hands. And person has to see if it's not in your hands, then there are higher things going on. And obviously God wanted God wanted you to get messed up in this situation. That's what he wanted. Why? Can't answer, but that's what he wanted. If it's something you could have prevented and you didn't, so you go against Kaufman's 614th commandment, don't be stupid, or 615th commandment, don't be a moron. You did it to yourself. And that's worse. That's a lot worse. Because then a person said, I was careless, I wasn't cautious, this, that. Okay. That's harder to bear. Much harder to bear. Yeah, when it's Lamalu Minatev, it's above nature, then a person has to see that this is what God wanted. Right? And then a person has to acknowledge that. Right? Without being broken. But again, remember what we said. Someone goes through life and they see, towards the end of their life, they got burns. Right? Right? They get burnt. Nobody wants to get burned like that. Right? Nobody. But if they have the ability to see afterwards, so that's huge. They get the message the hard way. God doesn't want us to get that message. He wants us to do what we need to do. He wants us to be as great as we can be. But at the end of the day, it doesn't mean we're going to see the bigger picture the way we should. And it could be we don't see the picture the way we should because he wants you to lose. Yeah. But at the end of the day, what do I need to do? I need to take all this into account and realize one thing. right? What's the thing I have to realize? I have to realize God's one in charge. That's it. He's the one in charge. I have to put my best foot forward. I have to live Torah the best way I can, right? So therefore, putting my best foot forward, as we always say, it's not a guarantee. It's for sure not a guarantee, but I have to do it anyway. And I have to realize he's the one out there, and we have to pray on a regular basis. He puts me in the right direction. I do the right thing. We have to work at that. We have to work, and something very, very hard. One of the things we have to do beyond the shadow of doubt is I have to change the way I think. And I have to think the way the Torah wants me to think. It's also easier said than done, but that's what I have to do. And no matter what happens, no matter what tempest we go through, and whatever hardship, God's the one in charge. That's what we have to keep saying. You're the one in charge. Help me do your will. Help me go in the right direction, and help me do what I need to do, to reach my potential. But to be able to see the bigger picture, even if it's hard or even seems impossible. Yeah, let me just see, are there any questions here? Yeah, any questions? Good. I'm going to stop here. It's every Saturday, 2 o'clock Eastern Time, 9 o'clock Israel Time. Anyone has any questions, find me on Facebook at Mark Chaim Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, orthodoxconversion.com. Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos and Q&As, Ethics of Fathers, Book of Leviticus. You want to send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RBBICHAIMCOFFMAN @gmail.com, which I